Evening light spilled through the glass walls of the golden terrace, casting gold across marble floors and the quiet hum of power. Waiters moved like shadows, serving those who believed the world belonged to them. Among them was Sarah Chun, 26, her uniform flawless, her eyes calm but guarded, a woman who once held 2 degrees but now hid behind a tray. Then Victor Cain arrived, billionaire, loud, untouchable. When a few drops of water landed on his $15,000 suit, silence swept the room. "Are you blind or just stupid?" he barked. Every gaze turned. Sarah froze, humiliation burning beneath her stillness. But something shifted inside her. The woman he mocked as uneducated was about to speak, and nothing in that room would ever feel the same again. Subscribe to Canada's Heartfelt Tales, because what comes next will leave you breathless. The sound of his insult hung in the air like smoke that refused to clear. Every head in the golden terrace turned toward their table, the glow of chandeliers glinting off polished glasses and judgmental eyes. The pianist stopped mid-note. Even the air conditioning seemed to pause. Sarah didn't move. Her breath came slow, measured, her fingers resting lightly on the handle of the pitcher. For months she had trained herself to vanish, to become background noise in a world that never saw her. But tonight, something inside her refused to stay quiet. "I asked you a question," Victor Cain said, his voice low but sharp enough to cut. "Are you stupid?" The words echoed. They struck deeper than he could ever know. The manager froze halfway across the dining room, unsure whether to intervene. The other servers ducked their heads, praying not to be pulled into it. Sarah finally spoke, her tone steady. "It was an accident, sir. I'll clean it right away." Victor leaned back, examining her the way one might study a stain. "Accident? Course it was. People like you live on accidents. Born by accident, hired by accident, and someday fired by one." The laughter that followed wasn't loud, but it was cruel. It came from the 2 men sitting with him, investors, judging by the nervous cufflinks and forced smiles. The woman at the table looked away, embarrassed, yet too afraid to speak. Sarah set the pitcher down. "Would you like another napkin, sir?" He smirked. "No, I'd like competence." But clearly that's too much to ask. Something in her chest tightened. It wasn't just anger. It was exhaustion, the kind that builds slowly, drop by drop, over years of being dismissed, underestimated, erased. She took a breath. "Excuse me for a moment," she said softly, and walked toward the service station. Behind the curtain dividing the kitchen from the dining floor, her hands trembled. James, the senior waiter who'd begged her to cover the table, appeared pale. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. I didn't know he'd—" "It's fine," she interrupted. "You didn't cause this." He swallowed hard. "Just let the manager handle it. That man's dangerous. I've seen him make people cry for less." She nodded, but her mind was elsewhere. Years ago in a courtroom, standing behind a desk piled with case files, listening to a client describe how Victor Cain had destroyed his life. She remembered his voice, too smooth, too confident, the way he twisted facts until truth bent to money. And now he was here, sitting in front of her, calling her uneducated. When she stepped back onto the dining floor, the scene looked the same. Crystal lights, quiet music, the hum of wealth, yet something had changed inside her. The fear that once kept her invisible had turned into focus. She approached the table again, her steps quiet but firm. The investors had returned to their meal, pretending nothing had happened. Victor raised his glass of wine, smirking as if daring her to make another mistake. "Sir," she said, her voice calm but resonant. "About your suit." He cut her off. "You still here? Didn't I teach you your place already?" A hush fell over nearby tables. The woman at his side whispered, "Victor, maybe let it go." "No," he snapped. "People need to know their level. She works for tips. I make the kind of money she couldn't count in a lifetime." End of story. Sarah's eyes met his, and for the first time, he saw something there. Not fear, not apology, but strength. "With all due respect," she said slowly, "you might be overestimating your story." A ripple passed through the room, Surprise, disbelief, curiosity. Victor's jaw tightened. Excuse me. Sarah's voice remained even. You assume I don't understand who you are. But I do. I know exactly who you are. Watch your tone, he growled. The manager started toward them, whispering urgently, Sarah, please. But she raised one hand gently, never taking her eyes off Cain. You said people like me serve people like you, she continued. But people like me also read your contracts, audit your companies, and clean up your messes when your greed burns everything down. Murmurs swept across the restaurant. The investors exchanged uneasy glances. Victor forced a laugh, but the sound cracked halfway. She's delusional, he told his guests. Probably thinks Google Translate makes her smart. Sarah's tone didn't waver. I speak English, Mandarin, French, Spanish, and German. You've been mispronouncing half your investors' names all evening. I figured I should correct that. One of the investors, a tall man with a European accent, turned toward Victor, frowning. She's right. You said my partner's name wrong twice. Color drained from Cain's face. You're siding with a waitress. I'm listening to someone who pays attention, the man replied coldly. The air tightened. The pianist began playing again, softly, as if to cover the tension, but the melody trembled. Sarah leaned slightly forward. Before you decide who belongs where, maybe you should check who's actually keeping your empire standing. Victor slammed his hand on the table. Glasses rattled. You're done here. The manager arrived just in time to hear it. Mr. Cain. I'll have her fired. Victor barked. Tonight. Sarah straightened. That's fine. But before I go, I think your investors should know the kind of man they're dealing with. Enough, he shouted, but his voice no longer commanded the room. It begged for control he no longer had. Sarah turned toward the investors. You're here for a partnership, right? For the Berlin and Shanghai projects. The men stiffened. How do you? I used to work for the law firm that handled his previous settlements, she said evenly. He forged documents, inflated profits, threatened whistleblowers. And when they tried to fight back, he buried them under non-disclosure agreements. Victor lurched to his feet. Lies. All of it. One investor pulled out his phone. What firm? Morrison and Associates, Sarah replied without hesitation. Case 2847B. You'll find it sealed but not erased. The typing on the phone grew frantic. A second later, the man's expression changed. It's real, he muttered. Settled out of court 8 months ago. The restaurant buzzed like a live wire. Diners whispered, phones flickered, waiters froze. Sarah's voice softened but carried weight. You said people like me don't matter. But sometimes the ones you ignore are the ones who remember the truth. Victor's face turned crimson. You think you can humiliate me? I own this city. Then maybe the city deserves better owners, she said quietly. The investors stood. This meeting is over, one said coldly. Expect a full investigation. Victor tried to protest, but the woman beside him rose too. Her diamond necklace caught the light. You've embarrassed yourself, she said. And for once, I'm glad someone made you listen. The murmurs grew louder. Phones recorded from every angle. Victor's power, built on fear, collapsed beneath exposure. He looked at Sarah, his voice shaking. You'll regret this. No, she said, you will. He stormed out, his footsteps echoing like a verdict. The door shut behind him, and the sound was final. Silence returned, but it was different now. Lighter, cleaner, like the air after a storm. The manager turned to Sarah, his eyes wide. Are you okay? She nodded faintly, adrenaline still humming beneath her skin. Yes. For the first time I think I am. A soft cheer rose from the back of the room, quiet at first, then growing. Diners clapped. Stood. The pianist smiled and began playing again, this time brighter. Sarah walked toward the kitchen, her pulse steadying. James waited by the counter whispering, "That was unbelievable." She gave a small smile. It wasn't bravery. It was just truth. He shook his head. Truth takes courage. Later in the dim staff room she sat alone, her phone buzzing endlessly. Videos. Mentions. Headlines already spreading. Waitress exposes billionaire in front of investors. The screen lit with an unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. Miss Chun, a calm voice said. This is Diana Park from the Securities Commission. We'd like to discuss your knowledge of Mr. Cain's business practices. Sarah's heart steadied. I'll help, she said. He's hurt enough people. When she hung up, the city outside felt different. The night air carried sound, laughter, cars, life. And for the first time in months, she didn't feel small inside it. By morning, every news outlet had the story. Cain's companies went into lockdown. His investors demanded audits. Authorities confirmed investigations for fraud and extortion. Within a week, his accounts were frozen. At the Golden Terrace, business boomed. Customers came not just for the food but to see the woman who'd faced a billionaire and won. The manager met her near the entrance one evening. You know, he said softly, you've given this place a new kind of reputation, one built on integrity. Sarah smiled. Then it was worth it. He handed her an envelope. A woman from Cain's table left this for you. Inside lay a cashier's check, $20,000, and a note written in elegant cursive. For your courage. For reminding the world what respect looks like. Sarah stood there speechless. For so long she had hidden from her past, from her failures, from her own potential. But that night the world had seen her. Not as a waitress, not as a servant, but as a voice that mattered. Still part of her ached. Not with regret but reflection. She remembered the faces of Cain's victims. The quiet despair she had once carried herself. She wanted to do more than just expose evil. She wanted to rebuild hope. When another call came days later, from a law firm offering her a position to lead an ethics division, she didn't hesitate. Yes, she said. But only if I can take cases that help the people no one listens to. Her first day back in an office smelled of paper, ink, and possibility. As she placed a framed photo of her parents on the desk, she whispered, I'm done hiding. Outside, rain began to fall. Soft, steady, cleansing. Miles away, Victor Cain sat in a marble penthouse stripped of silence. His phone rang endlessly. Lawyers, creditors, investigators. The empire he'd built through intimidation now devoured him with exposure. In the reflection of his black glass window, he saw not power but the face of a man who had finally lost control. And somewhere in the city he once owned, a young woman walked home under the rain. No longer invisible, no longer afraid. Because the truth, once spoken, doesn't fade. Echoes. Weeks passed, but people still whispered her name. Not as gossip, but as proof that one voice could shake an empire. Sarah never chased the fame that followed. She simply showed up every day, doing her work with quiet purpose. Yet something inside her had changed forever. Where she once walked with her eyes lowered, she now met every gaze head-on. She no longer feared being seen, she welcomed it. Because being seen meant being heard. And being heard meant her truth had weight. One night, leaving the office after another long day helping victims of corporate abuse, she paused outside under the city lights. A reflection flickered in the glass. Not the waitress from before, not even the lawyer she used to be, but a woman rebuilt from both. Stronger, wiser, unbreakable. Behind her, a newspaper headline glowed in a shop window. Cain Industries officially dissolved. Investigations lead to criminal charges. She smiled softly, not out of revenge, but release. In a world that often rewards silence, Sarah chose to speak. And that choice changed everything. If this story moved you, show your support. Like, share, and subscribe to Canada's Heartfelt Tales. Because every voice, no matter how small, deserves to be heard.